The first warning was not sound or light, but subtraction. A relay in the Astropathic choir sputtered and returned nonsense. No storm, no measurable interference, only a new absence, the shape of something that refused to be defined. Navigators checked their charts and found the warp thinned to ragged threads. Vox arrays still hummed, lights still burned, but a sense, like standing at the lip of a bottomless well, spread quietly through stations and dormitories. At first, officers spoke of storms, of routine anomalies. They annotated logs and invoked precedents. But as hours became days, the warp did not rage. It diminished. Astropaths bled from the eyes in dreamless sleep, not from overload, but from pressureless squeeze. Navigators opened their third eyes and saw less than darkness, a subtraction that left their senses grasping not void, but the negative of all knowing. Ships moved like blind animals nosing along walls. Choirs sang across the void, and the void refused to carry. On the mining moon of Vorla, industry stumbled without complaint. Conveyors ran, drills turned, but workers spoke in narrower sentences. Arguments died before anger formed. Children stopped playing because they could not invent games. Sermons became lists. Lists became tallies of names whose faces blurred. When spores blossomed in sump drains, no one noticed. Noticing required will, and will was eroded. On the pilgrim world of Harvalis, cathedral bells loosened in their frames. Processions moved, priests lifted reliquaries, but prayers were repetitions divorced from petition. They sounded like rain in a sealed room. One penitent described stepping into a memory and finding only a hole. Another said it felt like hearing your name called by a mouth that had never learned language. The priest wrote both accounts, then forgot why. In orbiting stations, crew woke without dreams, left only with a bruised flavor of loss. Some scratched themselves raw to feel anything. Others became methodical, mechanically kind. A petty officer who once swore over engine failures began to say only, "Yes, all right." A week later, he walked out an airlock with calm posture and his cap set straight. His note contained a single line drawn corner to corner, a shard of geometry standing in for words he could not summon. When the ships came, vast, chitinous silhouettes, they did not intrude so much as reveal. What had felt like poverty turned out to be appetite. The shadow was not storm or silence. It was pressure of endless intention. The bioships drifted with the inevitability of an equation. Pilots spoke of gravity that pulled not on mass, but on meaning. Planetary defenses ignited late, their alarms choking through filters. Crews loaded shells with perfect cadence, but no curses. Motions looked diagrammatic, stripped of struggle. Software spat out curves of likelihood, and humans accepted them with indifference. No one asked for miracles. The shadow issued the exact despair needed to prevent asking. On Gethsum, spore clouds fluoresced as they fell, breaking into glittering motes that looked like dust from a festival. Soldiers sealed suits and fired flames, but without superstition or defiance. The spores landed, not with noise, but with certainty, dividing and spreading like an answer already known. Cities under the shadow still function. Bakers rise, teachers lecture, presses print, but meanings melt. Obituaries hold names without stories. Crime declines, not from virtue, but from lack of desire. The economy loosens like a tooth. A child watches a moth and cannot decide whether to trap or free it, then forgets the moth existed. In orbit, bioships pulse. They extrude tendrils of living metal and muscle. Their pulses are not voices, but tides. Now seek, now cut, now grow. Machine priests tried to decode them, and instead wept in unison, fogging their masks. The shadow teaches, you will not be interpreted, only metabolized. Not all resistances are weapons. In one capital, a teacher gave every child a stone and told them to name it hourly. Stone, they said, through the drone of distant fire. For 3 days, the ritual held. On the 4th, the headmaster collected the stones because they had become a chore. He was not cruel, only arithmetical. When the first wave of organisms reached ground, violence brought clarity. Soldiers screamed, mothers ran, commands crystallized. For a brief hour, the shadow receded before the vocabulary of death. Fire teams pivoted, artillery corrected. Then the reservoir of will collapsed, and indifference returned. The shadow permits a number of heroics, because it knows they are chemical, and chemicals can be washed away. Historians will later list worlds, measure biomass consumed, tally weapons spent. But numbers cannot describe the hour on Harvalis, when an organist pressed his keys and every note left the pipes as air. He pressed harder, and nothing came. He stopped, and in the stop there was no shame, because shame requires a witness. The shadow had erased the witness. Hive spires rose where cities once stood, folding roads into veins, rail lines into throats. The air tasted of wet coin. Survivors stopped whispering names, stopped opening final rations, stopped scratching days on walls. They did not die immediately. They waited. Waiting itself became a lesson in being consumed. On Getham's western plain, a battery of macro cannon found one last defiance. Crews targeted manually and tore open the clouds, letting the sun reach ground for the final time. Faces lit, colors returned, difference made choice, and for a heartbeat, humanity laughed. 2 great sacks were destroyed, shockwaves clearing the sky. The shadow hesitated, then pressed down harder. Stories speak of a servitor that ceased tallying ammunition and began to hum. Overseers purged it, relieved to silence the anomaly. Yet one deckhand wept because the humming had made a shape in the air, a shape that did not belong to subtraction. She forgot why she cried. The shadow is professional about erasure. Eventually, the shadow leaves, not like a storm, but like digestion. The warp warms again. Astropaths wake to pain and then to sound. Navigators open their third eyes and glimpse an afterimage that should not exist. Then it fades. Bells ring wrong at first, then right. Survivors discover they choose more fiercely, each choice dragging across a scar. Some become preachers of noise, some tender, some go still forever. Cities rebuild or vanish. The species persists. Arithmetic is patient. And out beyond the brightened lanes, the next dimming begins. It is never personal. It is never punishing. It is tide. Choirs sing, and their song carries or it does not. Somewhere a boy learns a word and holds it. Somewhere a woman forgets the color of her birth sky. The shadow arrives not to convince, but to remove the need for convincing. Between one breath and the next, all arguments end, and the mouth opens for feeding.